myself all straightened up here with Tony. I'm going to do a quick informal introduction here before we start rolling. We got to turn it on. Is that what it is? There we are.
Get right into it.
How are we doing? Yours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Red Pill Politics Show. This actually started out, for those of you who have heard it already, I apologize for my redundancy. Started out as a homeschool project for my two sons when I realized that our government schools had turned into indoctrination camps. I pulled them out, homeschooled them. And one of the things they did is they had their own radio program, the local FM station. And I would drive an hour there and an hour back to bring them in every week. And I said, well, you know, if a couple of young teenagers can get their own show, maybe I'll try and apply for my own. And I did. I did 3.5 years on FM radio. And the most fun I had was going out and doing events like this, where you actually got to meet people, had a live interactive component to it. Absolutely love it. So Cindy and I have continued that effort. And that's why we're here today. So I want to thank Chris and the folks here at Compass Tavern for having us. We're going to have a little fun, get a little information out there today. So let's all relax and have a good time. You hear something you like, cheer and clap. You hear something that pisses you off, boo and hiss. But then when the dialogue picks up, we'll bring it down to a dull roar and start paying attention to the discussion again. Are all of our camera people ready? We're going to get this show on the road. Chris, give me a 10-minute warning. If there's anyone that has questions towards the end, we'll save a few minutes to the end for any questions that people might have. That being said, are we rolling?
We are rolling.
We're rolling, yes.
All right, we're going to start Red Pill Politics in a traditional fashion in 3, 2, 1. Well, howdy there, patriots and obedient vassals. Welcome back to another dose of Red Pill Politics, the show that is not FDA approved. Which can only mean one thing. Probably won't kill you and you just might learn something. I am your opinionated and abrasive host, Dave Kopaz, and to my left, Mr. Jay McMahon, candidate for Attorney General. Let's hear it from my guest today. Alright, we're going to talk about a few things that are of particular interest to me. We're going to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment, as I view our Second Amendment as under relentless attack right now by both state and federal government. They do not understand the concept of do not infringe. We're going to talk a little bit about immigration, as I cannot speak for everybody, but today I'm going to speak for those that view our immigration as a modern day election rigging. As we come close to 2020, I see some parallels there. I see a Cloward Piven style attack on our economy in the nanny state, the handouts that we've had. So we're going to talk a little bit about immigration and naturalization as well. Let's kick this off. Mr. McMahon, tell us a little bit about yourself and what finally pushed you to the point, because this is your second run.
Right.
What pushed you to the point where you felt compelled to run for Attorney General of Massachusetts?
Well, I'm an attorney. I live on Cape Cod. I'm married, got 4 children now. I had 5. I lost one to the opiate crisis, my oldest. I live on Cape Cod. Been married for 26 years. I've been a lawyer for 30 years, and I have a trial practice. I'm the only lawyer in my office, but I've got some paralegals and secretaries, and I make a living doing trial work. I do all kinds of cases. I do a fair amount of criminal cases, domestic relation cases, and civil trial work, car accident cases, that sort of thing. So when you think of a lawyer who's in court, or you see him on TV courts, that's basically what I do. I've been doing that for 30 years. I rely on the Constitution in the defense of my clients. I am also, shall we say, I'm a conservative. I'm a constitutional conservative. Now, some politicians like to grab that term and think it describes them as something, but I love the Constitution. I understand how it came about. I'm a historian, so I have studied the reasons for things and what the thinking was in our founding fathers as to why we have what we have and why the Constitution says what it says. And I have a deep appreciation for what they saw in the insights of what they had for this nation. And it's worked well for over 200 years. And so seeing that and understanding that, and also being a historian of Western civilization, I've been following what's been going on in Massachusetts. And I was deeply disturbed in 2017 when Maura Healey unilaterally decided that certain citizens could not purchase certain guns because, to be honest, she thinks they're scary guns. It's a typical socialist approach, but she just decided unilaterally that these guns should not be available for patriotic citizens in Massachusetts. I was appalled by that. And I started talking to groups just because I'm a lawyer and people know that I rely on constitutional rights when it comes in some of the cases that I have. And so I started speaking on that, and I was really ginning it up saying someone needs to run against her. I wish the Democrats would put somebody up against her who at least, even though they're liberal, but they embrace the Constitution and say, look, this is what the Constitution says. We received an inheritance from our founding fathers that are important. It's the best government in the world. It might not be the most perfect, but it is the best in the world. And so I was sort of trying to gin it up. No one was coming forth to challenge her. No one on the Republicans. I was hoping that there would be either some strong prosecutor or someone that's on that side that would say, hey, wait a minute. This is a complete infringement. And there's nothing like the words itself that says shall not be infringed, talking about the Second Amendment. So make a long story short, through that process, a lot of people came up and say, listen, you got a good grip on this. You got a handle on that. You should do it. And pretty much, well, they convinced my wife. I was convinced, but they convinced my wife. And that's where we were at.
Now, and what she did at the capacity of Attorney General really wasn't even within her purview. She just was redefining and trying to inject her own opinion into an existing ruling out there, and again, all based on fear. I see nothing but fear that comes out of the left as they try to move their agenda forward. They don't come out with facts and statistics. They come out with emotional arguments and fear mongering, but that really wasn't even within her purview in her job description to do what she did.
It was emotion, it was fear, and it was feeling. It's one of those things that that these snowflakes like to do. They just feel that you don't need a gun. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, you know, there was, the police raided someplace and they got the guy had 20 guns. I mean, how many guns do you need? The Constitution doesn't talk about need. It doesn't talk about need. It talks about the right to keep and bear arms with an S. It's plural, not one, it's plural. Now somebody said, well, yeah, but, you know, he had 20 guns. I said, look, if Wild Bill Hickok proved anything, he proved that you can only fire 2 guns at the same time, and not very well. So what difference does it make how many guns they have?
Right now, and the one thing that was ignored is she was pushing this agenda too, is I believe it was the CDC and some of their numbers where they actually evaluated instances where guns likely saved and defended lives, and if we wanted to play along with their emotional argument, the owning guns, having everyone defensible in themselves and their family, would actually statistically bear out the truth. You know, the CDC said that there's more lives saved than taken by guns, and we never saw that. Those facts never came out in their argument at all.
They never come out, and also, whenever there's a mass shooting, whenever the shooter is taken out by an individual other than law enforcement. And that's usually because the individual is on the scene with a firearm and he does the job and gets it done. That may make the front page one day, and then it gets buried. You never hear about it afterwards. It's always when the police and the SWAT and everybody has to show up. Now all of a sudden, they got another example of why people shouldn't have guns. But every time that some individual takes care of it, it's the press. The press will not, they somehow don't want to glorify or give credit to people like veterans or somebody that has a firearm that has saved the day. It's too bad, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
But that is what happens.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right.
There are stories out there of 14-year-olds whose homes were being invaded, you know, who would actually use one of those scary AR-15s to fend off an actual violent aggressor, someone who's broken into their homes. There's a lot of stories like that, and you're exactly right. They're not brought out that often.
They're buried. They're buried on purpose.
Yeah.
There's a policy that the mass media has decided to do, and it's to bury those stories.
Well, statistically speaking, as I like to go with the facts and what's available out there, you know, I'm not in favor of banning much of anything myself. But if you wanted to prevent mass killings and school shootings, and it had to be done through a ban, I would say that we ban progressives. Most of the shooters out there, if you look statistically, there's a couple of things that play out as reality. They're from not just progressive and leftist political leanings, but sometimes from households, because there are a lot of young people. The households, the parents are radicalized leftists. So we have that the killers tend to be from the political left. And another thing too,
And they hate Trump.
yeah, they've got Trump derangement syndrome. Maybe that's what pushed them over the edge. But another thing too, and this ties in a little bit with an area of expertise of yours, is many of them are on some pretty harsh medications. All right, and these, sadly, they don't come off the streets. They come off from doctors' prescription pads, and we're seeing a lot of these shooters are taking drugs whose stated side effect is homicidal and suicidal thoughts. So let us start an open debate on the true characteristics of these shooters. They come from radicalized political views, and they're often on medications that warn us ahead of time that these things might be coming.
That's right.
Now, opioids. I've got to agree with you. I don't think there's anyone in any town here in the Commonwealth who hasn't seen in their newspaper an endless flow of overdoses, drug dealers being caught, prosecuted, and usually cut right back out on the streets again. We are awash in drugs right now, and I always look for these areas when anything is so profoundly present in our culture. It's been institutionalized in some way, shape, or form. And when we look at these types of drugs, we see, again, they're coming from doctors' offices sometimes. People are stealing them from each other. There was a woman, I promise you this happened right in my backyard as I'm trying to raise my kids. This woman would once a year go out, and she was on all kinds of psychotropics, put a rock through her car window, get a police report. They said the only thing they took, they didn't take my expensive radio, they didn't take my other stuff. They went directly into my glove box and took my whole new freshly filled prescription of drugs. And they get that police report, go get another bottle, and these things were going from anywhere from $10 to $60 a piece in street value. I look and I know many veterans that have come back from Afghanistan whose primary job over there was guarding poppy fields. So if we've got $5 a bag heroin in our streets here, economics, man, boy, it works every time. Supply and demand dictates price. How is it we have $5 a bag heroin on our streets? I think it's linked to the fact that those higher up maybe created a conduit from places like Afghanistan into this country. So solving the opioid crisis is going to be a tough one. I don't know what the real answer is. I do know that it's killing young people in this country, in our own towns, every single day. What would normally be productive young men and women are saddled and chained down by this horrible addiction. And it doesn't just affect the individual, it doesn't affect just their immediate family. It is a wet blanket on all of us. The country is less strong with an epidemic at this level.
Absolutely. It kills us.
What are some of the solutions? What would you go after? What pressure would you bring on to make sure that these things are, at least they know we're coming and we're watching, but how do we save lives? And I don't know that Narcan is it.
All Narcan does is keep the individual alive for the opportunity to get rehabilitated. Other than that, they're dead.
You know, I know police officers have said they've Narcan the same person 2, 3, 4 times a day.
Absolutely.
On a day like this, a beautiful summer day, they're out partying, and they come back and do the same person. You were talking earlier, these statistics are often used by the Attorney General's office and others saying, hey, we use Narcan 1,500 times in such and such a period and saved all these lives. Many times it's the same addict that's going out and getting Narcan the second, third, and fourth go around, but where do we start? Where does the pressure come from that's going to turn that ship around?
Some government official, I always used to say on the campaign trail, and I'll say it again, a higher up government official has to put the spotlight and focus on this problem. Right now, Maura Healey will say, oh yeah, no, we're doing an investigation. And they throw it in those kind of terms, we're investigating. Nothing's coming about it, but this in it. But instead of criticizing her, although she deserves to have all the criticism you can imagine, I do lay this at her feet though, and I'll tell you why. Nothing is coming out of her office as far as enforcement or rehabilitation. Everybody on the planet knows that government rehabilitation programs are 99% failure. However, private pay rehabilitation programs have an 85% success rate. 85%. In other words, my feeling is no matter what the cost is, go for the 85%. Because we are rehabilitating people, we are taking them, and Dave, we are really healing them from their addiction. Now, at some point, when you have your one of your future programs, you've got to have a guy on named Dr. Kishore. I will give you his contact information. He is the #1 rehabilitative physician in the country. I've gotten a lot of statistics from him. Basically, it goes like this. If you have a rehabilitation program that's 85% success, all you have to do is duplicate it. And I came up with a plan based on my conversations with him and other opiate rehabilitative physicians. I have about 12 of them that have supported me because they knew what I was trying to do. And they heard what I was saying and what my effort would be. And it goes like this. It's a two-prong approach, sort of three-prong, but two major prongs. And it goes like this. Enforcement. First of all, we have to be committed to enforcement. Right now, there's only one individual in government who is doing it, and that is the United States Attorney from Massachusetts, Andrew Lilly. He's the only one who is spotlight. In other words, all the federal resources are going after obtaining and doing what needs to be done for law enforcement purposes. It's the feds. Maura Healey is not even part of that. There's no telling do they even communicate with each other. Now, just to bring in practical standards, I would have lunch with him at least once a week to coordinate our efforts. I would say, give us information. I will make sure that the 300 state police troopers that are attached to the AG's office are working with you guys. Even if we're just, the helicopter is following them in and they're crossing the border from New York, we'll pull them over. We'll make the bus. We'll do all the things we have to do. And if the federal laws are stronger, we'll prosecute them in the feds. I don't care. Just get it off the streets. And that's what we would be doing, interdiction and enforcement. I would make it a priority, but I would go another step further, and that's the Rehabilitation Act. And here's where I say it's sort of a two-prong, three-prong. Rehabilitation, there's a two-prong approach in there. First of all, I would go to the government programs, and I would say, you knew, just through statistics, that your programs are a 99% failure. I would sue them on behalf of the Commonwealth and the taxpayers for the money we've been paying for them. And I would make sure that they come up to certain standards. And I would have a review board that would go in. And we would just shut that spigot off and shut those funds off and put them in real rehabilitation programs. So now let's talk about rehabilitation. How long does it take to really rehabilitate someone? Well, ideally, 180 days. You can shorten it, but the end you shorten it on is in the beginning end. Look, ladies and gentlemen, this is Massachusetts. We're the medical capital of the world. Kings and queens and prime ministers and presidents, they don't go to their capital cities. They come to Massachusetts. They come to Boston to get all their ailments taken care of. And we can do it. We should be #1 in the nation and #1 on the planet in rehabilitation. We're not, because we're not putting any effort into it. But if we start focusing it, we can do it. And it goes like this. We have the technology to give addicts a soft withdrawal. We can take them through a withdrawal period within 2 days by using non-narcotic medication to counteract their withdrawal symptoms. Because that's the worst thing that addicts want, is withdrawal. Right now, they'll put them in a straitjacket, throw them in a rubber room, and see them in 3 days. And they go through the most horrendous withdrawals. We can counteract those in a day and a half. Then we start, as long as we can get them to the point where they can start taking nourishment, now we can put them in a recovery period. The problem is, after the first week, they're starting to feel good. They say, hey, I'm okay now. No, you're not. We know you're not. And what you do is you put them through the recovery program. Now, how do we do this? We need a feed system. You say, well, what's a feed system? Well, a feed system goes like this. You have local police, and you tell them, we have a program. The Attorney General's office has a program that goes like this. If you arrest somebody for possession or in a car accident, and they got a needle in their arm and they're passed out, they are a candidate for our rehabilitation program. Now, you can't force people into rehabilitation, but you can make a deal. We will waive prosecution until you get through this program. If you go through the program voluntarily and complete it, as long as there are no victims, like a car accident where it wiped out a family or something like that, or somebody got shot in a holdup to cover the drugs, if that didn't happen, we will waive the prosecution of the case that brought you in here, and we will keep you and get you through this program. And when you get completed with the program, we will no pros the case, or actually not bring any charges. We can do that. Now, there's a thing called the statute of limitations. We got plenty of time. My thrust is to let's rehabilitate them. I'd rather them being a citizen, give them their life back, and guess what? We just made a taxpayer instead of somebody who's taken from the system. We can do that. There are policemen, firemen, teachers, physicians, and all kinds of professionals who are caught up in the opiate trap, in the opiate crisis. All of them. Rehabilitation is available. It's one of the few medical fields that you can almost guarantee 100% recovery by just monitoring and staying on top of them till they get through the program and they get healed. And Dave, we can give citizens their life back. No one who gets to the cleanup point and gets out wants to go back to that life along the streets.
Yeah, and I kind of like that idea of, giving them that opportunity early on to enter this program. You got me there. I'm in favor of that. Putting them in jail. Quite often, young people, when you arrest them for, whatever, whether it's heroin or pot or whatever, and they get thrown into jail, they're hardened. they're not being rehabbed too much in there. They're coming out learning, you know, not only where to get more drugs, but now how to hotwire a car. So I don't know that prison is a place for someone who does things like that. Rehabbing them, that's the permanent solution. Now, you said yourself, 99% of these people that enter a rehab situation are destined.
The government programs.
The government programs are destined for failure, and I believe that. I got a lot of family that's employed in this field. My wife and my son are two of those examples, and they would parrot back a lot of the things that you said today. It's a system destined for failure. I hear words like culturally sensitive care is the focus. Harm reduction. What I call harm reduction is switching from you know, one of those real sexy street drugs like crack and meth and transitioning them over to a pharmaceutical. All right, kind of like the ones that the mass shooters are on, not unlike those. How do we get these people? Because to me, swapping addictions isn't the cure.
No, it never was a cure, and because I know from talking to rehabilitative physicians, the best cure is taking everybody off of chemicals. Take them off chemicals. Just to tell you, sometimes the best rehab, at least in 3 instances that I know, are the local houses of correction, county houses of correction. Lou Evangelitis, right here, your sheriff, by the way, in Worcester County, has a good program for people that come in. Sometimes, though, the problem is they're not sentenced long enough, because if they're sentenced for 30 days, it's not going to work, because the program needs to be longer in order to be effective. But Lou has a good program in his jail. Plymouth County Sheriff Joe McDonald has an excellent program where of course it's easy to monitor them when they're in prison. They're sort of a captive audience, but there's an incentive to go through the program, and they get sentence reduction. And Jim Cummings, who's my sheriff down in Barnstable County, which is Cape Cod, in Cape Cod area, he also has a good program. Now, what's the common denominator there? Well, they're Republicans, and they care about the inmates, and they care about them doing something, getting through. And so they've been helping. And so they've got relatively successful programs.
What are some of the unique things about their programs that are making them successful, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, monitoring. They're making sure that nothing is being smuggled in. They also have them on, physicians are actually tending to them and taking them through, and they're doing excellent counseling. But the real thing is, because they're in prison or in jail, they don't have access to the people, the environment that causes them to go back into if they got a short sentence. So if they got 30 days, they got problems. Now, what is another thing is they don't have the funds, and this is where I would come in. They don't have the funds to help monitor these people once they get released, because once their sentences are over, they're out. But there is a way to do this. There's a way for government agencies, and you could do it through either parole, probation, or perhaps another agency where you monitor these people till they get through the 180-day program. In other words, allow them to enter into a program where they're still, even though their time is done, but they're in a program. These programs, by the way, are not lockdowns all the way to the end. There's incentives built in, but they wind up getting their job or getting a job, and they wind up being resolved holistically. Not just off of drugs, but also out of their environment, and they've got a support system.
That's what I was going to ask you about their environment. You know, a person in incarceration maybe having those second thoughts about the way of life that they've chosen with drugs, may actually get it in their heart that they want to be done with this. If they get back out in the streets and they're hanging out on the same street corners, got the same sets of friends, you know, that's got to be a recipe for disaster. It's got to be
Especially if they hook up with a significant other who is a user.
Yeah.
then it's.
So I imagine that would be worked in as part of the rehab, is training them to be in the right frame of mind and surround themselves with the right assets when they get out, right?
I have heard countless stories of people who have gone to rehabilitation, government rehabilitation, there's no follow-up afterwards. The weekend after they're out, they hang with their friends, and they die of an overdose because they cannot take the dosage that they used to take before they started the program, because their body's all healed up now, and their lives get snuffed out over that weekend. A couple of my people in my campaign have told me stories of their relatives where that was happening. And when you have it firsthand, and you look in their eyes, and here we are running a campaign, one of our main issues was the opiate crisis, and we got people connected to the campaign who are dying because of it.
It's a scourge. It does not hit just people who are poor, unwise youth. I know wealthy people whose quarterly dividend checks probably exceed what I'll make in 10 years. Very good friends of mine, one of them just died a couple of months ago. Enormously wealthy young people, bitten by that bug. It got both of them. They began losing their assets. One of them lost their life. It does not discriminate on who it takes. This is a horrible thing. The synthetic drugs that are out there now, these are every bit as addictive, and it can be as much of a problem as I mentioned swapping addictions. I think we got to be very careful in how and what we use from the medical field. I mean, harm reduction has gone overboard. It's gone from well, at least they're not on crack, but they're on something else that still makes them non-productive in society. I think it's an addictive trait that stays inside when you're trying to heal and you want to rid yourself of this. We need to get people in the right frame of mind, and I've caught some criticism for this. I wasn't always the finely polished diamond you see before you today. But after witnessing much of my family and friends who've worked in the field trying to help young people get off from this, the culturally sensitive stuff, trying to make addiction somehow, all flowery and it'll be okay, it's not your fault. I'm the other way around. I'm a tough love kind of guy. If I had a room full of addicts sitting down in front of me for one of their counseling periods, I would be pointing my finger at them and said, you have proven only one thing, that you, when given an opportunity to make a good decision and a bad one, you have chose the bad one. You have screwed your life up. You have caused horrors to your family and loved ones. It is time for you to get over yourself. Tough love time. This culturally sensitive stuff, out the window. I think it gives them all the excuses to say it ain't my fault. Well, it is your fault. All right? If people make decisions every day, they make good and bad decisions, one or the other. And when they make this bad decision, we shouldn't be praising them, telling them it's okay, it's not your fault. I would be very much a tough love type of person if I had to frame a rehab system. You got to get them in the right mind. They're not making the right decisions, but we can